Tonight, the Prime Minister's message to the country: choose renewal or choose decline, after admitting Labour is in the fight of its life with reform. Addressing a Labour conference here in Liverpool, Keir Starmer launches a fierce attack on Nigel Farage, questioning his motives and his patriotism.
The question I ask seriously of Nigel Farage and reform is, do they love our country? Do they want to serve our country, all of it, our beautiful, tolerant, diverse country, every region, nation and city? Or do they just want to stir the pot of division because that's worked in their interest?
Well, the Reform leader hits back, saying Starmer's unfit to lead the country. But did the Prime Minister do enough to turn the tide? We'll have full analysis of his speech from our political editor, Beth Rigby. Also tonight, as Donald Trump's Gaza peace deal hangs in the balance, we find out what people here in Liverpool think of their former leader, Sir Tony Blair's proposed role running Gaza, and speak to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper. The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, bigs up Labour's achievements on the NHS as the government announces what it calls a technological revolution for the health service in England. Plus, the Cabinet fly the flag for their leader's speech, but did they manage to keep their smiles up for an entire hour? Well, there is nothing fake about the smiles of our duo tonight, Tracy Brabin and Joe Grady. They'll be more than happy to be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Liverpool, and this is the Politics Hub. Starmer has delivered his speech to Labour conference, and actually I think it's one of the most impressive speeches that he's made, which is weird because it was all about Nigel Farage. It felt a bit like we'd wandered into the wrong conference with all the mentions of Reform UK. But here's the thing, a Prime Minister struggling to define himself has finally managed to do that by defining himself against Nigel Farage. He described a fork in the road, a choice between Labour and Reform. Two different parties, two different visions, two different versions of patriotism, two different ways of flying the flag. So rather than fishing in the same pond as Reform, trying to attract the same voters, I feel like this is a change of strategy for Labour. Instead, they're going for the voters who don't like Nigel Farage, because people, of course, don't just vote for who they like, but they also vote for who they don't like. And Labour's gambling that if they can be the anti-Reform party, well, that hoovers up the votes of people who don't like Farage, and they might just have a chance. Let's get a bit more analysis, shall we, about the big speech today, Keir Starmer's speech. We're joined by our political editor, Beth Rigby, who's here with us. And Beth, what do you make of it all?
Well, I was in the hall, and look, this was a moment that I think he knew he needed to land. It has been a dark period for a Prime Minister, struggling to galvanise his own party, struggling with a public that thinks he is not the change merchant that he said he would be, and dissatisfaction levels still high with public services, for example, and then also looking out onto the horizon, a Prime Minister who has some very, very severe and difficult challenges ahead. So there was a lot riding on this speech, and I think he knew that, and I think his team knew it. And you know, Sophie, what you were saying in your introduction there about kind of turning it into sort of a battle for the soul of the nation, the thing that struck me about that was this was how Joe Biden in 2022, ahead of the midterms in the US, pitted his fight against Trump. Now, he, of course, lost that fight, but what you see there is a Prime Minister that is trying to shape that narrative and shape that fight between Labour and this Prime Minister and Nigel Farage and Reform. And I think what he did in that room was he gave the Labour Party something to rally around, having felt a bit rudderless under Keir Starmer's rather technocratic managerial style. So I thought that this was a change in direction for him. And I think what it reflects from talking to people in the Cabinet and some of the people giving speeches on those stages and making the argument about taking the fight to Reform is that this is a Labour government that now feels like they are the underdog. They're 14 months into power. They really are struggling against the Reform. And it's like, well, let's just throw the kitchen sink at it. So I think that in the room and within the Labour Party, it was very galvanising. I think there's bigger and more difficult questions about how it lands in the country. So, yeah, he won the hall. But when he talks about a fork in the road and a difficult journey, by goodness me, in that speech he laid out some of those difficult points of that journey, not least the budget.
Yeah.
He didn't name it explicitly, but talking to Labour members about how difficult the road's going to be. And then he has a really acid test in the local and Welsh and Scottish elections next year. And I guess the question for me, and it will play out in the coming weeks, is that I've heard him talk about national renewal a lot, and I've heard him talk about his pride in the country. And the question is really for me is, can he now translate this battle into something that the public will pick up on? And he has created dividing lines between him and Farage, but the risk is that in criticising Farage, do those who follow him feel criticised? And I think you'll see in the coming few days a Prime Minister being quite careful about that. And I guess the point is, Sophie, that we've talked about this, politics is about momentum, and he's trying to get some momentum back. But when you've got a very difficult budget, potentially tax rises, and then you go into a very difficult set of elections, it's like, are the fundamentals going to move for him? But I think on the plus side for him, and I think he was genuinely very pleased to have delivered that speech and felt like he nailed that speech from what I've picked up. I guess now the bigger challenge really is that having reset with the party here, does it all unravel in the coming weeks, or can he keep the momentum?
Yeah, and the budget, of course, coming up as well. Beth, let's watch your report from earlier. Applause for this Prime Minister rare these days.
Your Prime Minister, Mr. Keir Starmer.
This a dark period as Keir Starmer battles his party and struggles in the polls. This speech, then, the beginning of the fight back.
The country faces a choice, a defining choice. Britain stands at a fork in the road. We can choose decency, or we can choose division, renewal or decline. It is a test, a fight for the soul of our country.
This a rallying call from a Prime Minister launching a battle against Nigel Farage and Reform UK, pitching Labour as the party of patriotic renewal and Reform as the party of decline.
Patriotism is about love and pride, about serving an interest that is more than yourself, a common good. And the question I ask seriously of Nigel Farage and Reform is, do they love our country? Do they want to serve our country, all of it, our beautiful, tolerant, diverse country, every region, nation and city? Or do they just want to stir the pot of division because that works in their interests?
The PM choosing his path, but warning about the journey ahead.
The path of renewal, it's long, it's difficult, it requires decisions that are not cost-free or easy, decisions that will not always be comfortable for our party. Yet at the end of this hard road, there will be a new country.
Keir Starmer 14 months into the job, but with a speech that felt like the start of a new campaign, repitching to the public by talking up some of his past achievements.
I make no apologies if they tilt towards working people, because it's working people who paid the price of Tory decline. That's why we invested in our NHS, fired up Great British Energy, stood up for British Steel.
This crowd in need of a pick-me-up, and he delivered.
A mark of a Britain built for all. Thank you, Conference.
And in a speech heavy on politics, there was new policy too. Keir Starmer scrapping Tony Blair's new Labour target that half of all young people should go to university.
I don't think that's right for our times. So, Conference, today I can announce we will scrap that target and replace it with a new ambition that 2/3 of our children should go either to university or take a gold standard apprenticeship.
This speech heavy on symbols too.
I'm not just proud of the Union Jack and the Cross of St George, I'm also proud of the Saltire, of the Red Dragon, proud of our union. So let's fly all our flags, conference, because they're our flags. They belong to all of us, and we will never surrender them.
Reclaiming the flag and calling out the racists seeking to divide this country.
Yet if they're painted alongside graffiti, telling a Chinese takeaway owner to go home, that's not pride, that's racism. If you say they should now be deported, then mark my words, we will fight you with everything we have, because you are the enemy of national renewal. We will renew this country until we can say with total conviction that Britain is built for all. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
This a Prime Minister on the ropes, but he's come out fighting today, not just for his own job, but for what he describes as the soul of the nation. With reform racing away, Starmer's trying to convince his party and the public to keep the faith. He's asking you to pick a side, and he's asking you to pick him. You're giving it a bit of punch now, aren't you?
Is it a bit of welly, Beth?
You're giving it a bit of welly.
Is it because what we believe in?
Is it because you feel like you're the underdogs after this sort of difficult 14 months?
I enjoy fighting for what I believe in. I know what I believe in, and Keir knows what he believes in. I wouldn't say anyone else had a plan. And what Keir and I have set out in our conference speeches in the last couple of days is our belief in Britain.
Do you think Nigel Farage is a racist?
Well, look, I think actually what Nigel Farage was saying is worse than racism. I think it's immoral. I think that is an extreme policy, and what he was deliberately doing was sending a signal, a dog whistle to every racist in the country.
There's still opposition to him in the party, isn't there? Do you think he's put it to bed?
I just don't think that's a thing. I think we've seen this...
Well, it is a thing.
I think, I don't think that sideshow really matters. What matters here is what we've just heard on the main stage from the Prime Minister, from the leader of our country.
Keir Starmer won the hall, giving him and these Labour members a much-needed lift in these heavy political times. He's gambling that his patriotic pitch of renewal will revive his and Labour's fortunes, but it is a very, very long road ahead. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Liverpool.
Well, look, we've been talking today about how frequently the Prime Minister mentioned Nigel Farage, targeting reform, telling conference that Nigel Farage didn't like Britain. And as you'd expect, Nigel Farage has responded. Here's what he said.
I used to think the Prime Minister was a decent man, somebody that I could talk to and chat to. We might disagree on worldview, but I thought he was a profoundly decent human being. I am completely shocked at his behaviour. I hope when he wakes up tomorrow morning, he feels ashamed of what he has done. This is a desperate last throw of the dice from a Prime Minister who's in deep trouble, a Prime Minister who can't even command the support of half of his own party. But I'm sorry to say, I now believe that he is unfit to be the Prime Minister of our country.
Well, let's bring in a duo for the evening, shall we? The Labour Mayor of West Yorkshire, Tracy Brabin, and the General Secretary of the University and College Union, Joe Grady. Great to have you both with us. Tracy, what did you make of the speech today?
Well, the Prime Minister had his Weetabix this morning, that's for sure. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was passionate. I thought he was talking about his values. I thought the announcements were really great. You know, we've had 50% expectation of young people going to university, changing that to 2/3 of our young people going to technical education or further education as well as university. I think that really reflects the modern world, but also talking about that revolution in tech and health, so people in rural communities can access appointments, those millions of appointments, so you haven't got that 8 a.m. scramble. But more fundamentally, I think as a mayor, it's really what we needed, because it's helped us frame people's concerns, legitimate concerns about migration, but also the violence that we've seen, trying to burn down hostels and hotels. And his example, I thought, was really clear, that painting an English flag on a Chinese restaurant is racism. And I think he got a huge cheer for that, because being able to identify and being bold enough to say there is a difference between the people people who are out on those streets, some absolutely really concerned about their communities, but others who are just troublemakers. And the fact that he opened it out, not just to Labour voters, but saying, whoever you vote for, this is your fight. And I thought that was really powerful.
Jo, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think it's an example of when the Prime Minister is on the front foot, he's speaking with conviction, he's speaking with ambition, he's going to connect with people. We were listening, sort of Team UCU, to the speech, and we were really pleased to hear the announcement about FE and HE and the ambition to have 75% of young people, students, progressing through that education. I think for us, and I think this will be the case for people outside of this conference hall, you know, not living in conference land, how is this going to be delivered? You know, in further education, 50% of FE lecturers leave within 3 years. FE lecturers are paid £7,000 less than school teachers. We already have a huge retention crisis. In higher education, we're looking at 15,000 redundancies. There is financial instability across the sector. So if Labour are serious about this, we need immediate commitments that they're going to close that pay gap. We need immediate commitments they're not going to allow 15,000 staff to be made redundant. And we need one hell of a commitment to invest in both those sectors in this budget. If we don't get those things, as impressive as that speech was today, it's incredibly hollow.
It's the policy follow-through as well, isn't it? Tracy, I'm interested, you know, as a mayor, what you've made of the kind of leadership rumblings around conference, bit of Andy Burnham.
Well, it's all great soap opera. As somebody that has been in soap opera in my past, it was great soap opera. I think this speech has put that to bed, absolutely, and I think Andy has said so himself as well. But there is a place for debate and discussion about new ideas and new ways to do things. But you know, there's only one Chancellor, and that's Rachel Reeves. There is no vacancy for Prime Minister, and I think that speech really showed Keir's mettle. I mean, he understood what needed to be said. And I thought
Andy Burnham didn't even stay for the speech. He left just before it.
Yeah, I actually think that was a sensible thing to do, because it would all have been about him, and there would have been cameras on him, and you know, I think that was very generous and you know, a kindness probably to the Prime Minister, because otherwise it would just have been, you know, all about Andy. You know, I just think you could feel the mood in the hall, that sense that actually with Margaret from the Hillsborough campaign as well opening it up, you would not have got that with anybody but a Labour government, and you know, getting that over the line, and that fairness and that working class sort of pride that he really lent into. I'm really hoping that will land outside of this conference hall.
I hate to be that person. I can completely understand your point of view, and I think in this hall there is a momentum, and I know that a lot of people were really wanting to see Keir step into the role that he did, and I agree with you that he did a really good job. I just think that a lot of people will also have been watching this conference, and there is mixed messages. You know, we had Rachel Reeves' announcement yesterday, which was essentially buckle up for more harsh austerity. You know,
she also mentioned the youth guarantee, which is also good for young people that are absolutely currently abandoned NEETs, sitting out of work for 3 years.
It is good for young people.
It's hard for mayors to step into that space, so it's good we've got that leadership.
I agree, but I go back to the exact point I made 2 minutes ago. If we don't get serious investment in further education and higher education, all of these ambitions that are being listed are not going to be delivered. And any conversation we've had with the Treasury for the past 14 months is, we are not giving you any money. So there's almost like a woven denialism within the policies. And I want Labour to succeed. I'm a Labour member, but there is a reality that isn't aligning with the messages that they want us to absorb.
Interesting discussion. Thanks both very much indeed. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, about Keir Starmer's speech, but also, of course, about Donald Trump's plan for Gaza. Thank you for being on the programme. Good to have you here.
Good to see you.
So let's talk about Keir Starmer's speech. It felt a bit like we kind of wandered into the wrong conference with all those mentions of Nigel Farage.
Well, I think this was a very a patriotic, powerful speech from Keir Starmer. And many of the themes that he's talked about before, things that I think he's referred to in previous speeches, but really very strongly coming together today. That sense of a really optimistic view of Britain's future, the renewal of Britain for the future, but also very practical things about what does that mean you have to do to make the country work for everyone, which it doesn't at the moment. So you heard about gold standard apprenticeships, for example, really valuing some of those vocational jobs that just haven't been in the past, and also modernising the National Health Service, the new online appointments as well for people, because the NHS is something that has been run down, but we do need it for our future.
It felt like it was almost trying to kind of define the choice at the next election, Labour and Reform. And I was interested to see Nigel Farage's reaction. He said, I used to think the Prime Minister was a decent man, thought he was a profoundly decent human being. I'm completely shocked at his behaviour. I hope when he wakes up tomorrow morning, he feels ashamed of what he's done. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's a bit of a ridiculous response. I think there is a choice between the renewal, the positive vision for the country in which we all come together to do it, and the really divisive approach that Reform have been putting forward, which is also actually about decline, because the approach they've taken is also would deny us some of the investment, the support for jobs that we need, so the strong future that we need, and also really divisive, really much about running the country down. But I think what you've heard there is Nigel Farage doesn't like his policies being criticised. He's not used to that. He's used to being able to just stand on the sidelines shouting, and actually, you know, we can't do that. We've got a real choice here. We're going to be honest with people about how divisive and how damaging those policies are going to be.
You say they're divisive and damaging. Do you think Nigel Farage is racist?
No, we're not saying that. What we're saying is that that policy, for example, that they've put forward, which is to say people who have been living in the UK for decades, who've got long-term leave to remain in this country, working in our National Health Service or setting up businesses here in the UK, and he's suddenly talking about deporting them. We're saying that policy is immoral, it's wrong, it's deeply damaging.
You're saying it's racist?
We think we should control. Well, that's what the Prime Minister said, yes.
But what do you think you do?
So what we've said is that what we have to do is control our borders. What we have to do is control migration, but what we shouldn't be doing is saying people who've been in this country for very many years suddenly have to return.
If you have racist policies, does that not make you racist?
No, so I think this is about where people right across the country who are concerned about all sorts of issues. But there are some policies that Reform has that are wrong. So lots of people have concerns about immigration, where, as you know, we've said for some time we need to make sure that legal migration is coming down. That did get out of control under the Conservatives, but also to make sure that we're dealing with the illegal migration, with the small boat crossings, some of those serious problems. But we will do so in a way that means those who respect the rules, those who are contributing to our country, aren't suddenly being told that they're going to be deported, even though they might have been living here for years. That's the divide.
You were Home Secretary until recently, right? Shabana Mahmood is now in that job. There is, I guess, a sense that she's, come in and grabbed the initiative. She's gone further in terms of rhetoric and also in policy when it comes to tackling immigration. Do you think you were the wrong person to take on Reform? Is that why they moved you?
Well, I think the policies that she set out this week were exactly the ones that we identified in the Immigration White Paper. So ensuring that actually people should be contributing in order to stay in the UK. So
credit for
those are
that you
exactly the
formulated?
Policies that we started that she's now taking forward. And it's brilliant that she is taking those policies forward. Likewise, we've seen some of the policies, for example, about returns to France that I'd set out before that Shabana is now taking forward. So I think this is very much about us working together to make sure that we can deliver the kinds of controls and reforms that we need.
Was it a bit frustrating to be moved from Home Secretary?
So this is a huge honour to be the UK's Foreign Secretary. So there was a lot of work that we were doing as Home Secretary, a lot of important work that Shabana's now taking forward. But now to be the Foreign Secretary at a time when we've had a really important and successful state visit, which has led to billions of pounds of investment, tech investment in the UK, that we have this peace initiative for Gaza and for the Middle East, which is incredibly important, that I was having a lot of meetings and discussions about last week in order to make sure we can take that forward. forward, and have also been to Kyiv. So many really serious issues around security, issues around how Britain responds on the global stage, that frankly it is an honour to do that job.
Let's talk about that peace policy, shall we? We saw, of course, the White House's 20-point plan for Gaza. So, firstly, do you endorse that plan?
Yeah, we strongly support this initiative. We need to take it forward. So we've been working with other countries. Arab states have been very involved in putting forward proposals that the US has now taken forward by setting out this plan this week. And we strongly support this initiative. We want all countries to come together and be part of it. And it is crucial that Hamas also accept, because we've got to get to the ceasefire, the release of all the hostages, and the restoration of aid, but also crucially to this proper pathway to a just and lasting peace for Palestinians and Israelis alike.
It was interesting to see Tony Blair's involvement in this as a help broker it. Will also be on the kind of so-called board of peace. Have you spoken to Tony Blair about it?
The government's been in touch with him, but this was a proposal that President Trump has put forward. So
but you have been
one of the
talking to Tony
things.
Blair about it
There
as
have been
well,
lots of discussions underway with lots and lots of different people, but the particular proposals that President Trump has set out included, as you can see, these 20 different points. A lot of discussions about it.
Well, one of them is talk about Tony Blair's
this board for peace that President Trump will chair. He's also put forward Tony Blair to be one of the leaders and ex-leaders. We're expecting there to be a series of those as part of it. That is really important, but we also need to make sure that we've got progress on the other areas as well.
I guess there might be some people asking today, why is Tony Blair involved in this? He's a kind of unelected, civilian. He was Prime Minister, decades ago. What's going on? Why is he?
So I think a lot of different people have been involved in this. So what started actually
he
in the
was
summer,
named by Donald Trump.
Yes,
I'm not just
exactly.
plucking this out at random.
Yes,
he's central to it.
So what started in the summer with the process around recognition, including the UK, France, Australia, Canada, and so on, has been really important. Recognising a Palestinian state for the first time. That's been alongside the agreement by the Arab League and Arab states to agree that there can be no role for Hamas in the future governance of Gaza or the future governance of Palestine. So you have those things happening together. And that work has then also led to a series of proposals for this framework for peace, contributing towards the 20 points. And Tony Blair's been one of the people who's been putting forward proposals. The UK government, the French government, Arab governments,
how's
and
his
so on
record in the Middle East
forward to it? Well, I think he'll be one of the people putting it forward. Remember, of course, he was the Middle East peace envoy for some years as well, and of course has a record on a lot of international things.
How did that go in that role?
That was an important role as part of working for different countries and working internationally as well.
I know the role, but how do you think he performed in it? What's his record like? I mean, people remember him from the Iraq War as well.
Yeah, and also from the work he did as Middle East peace envoy for a period of time. That was working with international governments for the US, the EU, the UN at that time, and also...
Not much peace in the Middle East now, though, is there?
Well, no, we've got an awful lot to do. I mean, I think this initiative is really important. And I think this is a moment that's come together, this moment now. So, it's an opportunity, but we really need all countries to come back together behind it.
How are we doing in the appointment of a US ambassador?
There's a process underway for that.
Do you have any timetables for
no,
timescale?
There's a process underway.
Okay. And finally, we're hearing this evening that Rachel Reeves is expected to kind of scrap the two-child benefit cap and replace it with a taper system. So in other words, you get less money the more children you have. Is that something that you'd support?
Well, there's a child poverty task force that's due to report that will been drawing together a whole series of issues looking at the real problems around child poverty. As you heard, though, from the Prime Minister today, we've already lifted thousands of children out of poverty. We've already got the proposals that's being set out on free breakfast clubs and also expanding free school meals for children, a lot of work around making it cheaper to be able to get school uniform and also helping parents back into work. So a whole range of things underway. The Child Poverty Task Force will be reporting soon and we look forward to that.
OK, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yvette Cooper there, and of course the Prime Minister's conference speech will feature in tomorrow's papers as well. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the broadcaster and commentator Duncan Barks and the journalist and broadcaster Sonia Soda. You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. We heard from Yvette Cooper just now, but how have Labour people here in Liverpool reacted to the prospect of Tony Blair playing a role in the future of Gaza? Find out next. I want to start the programme today with a name, a story that I can't get out of my head. The campaign has now started. This is your chance. Tell people, this is the Politics Hub. It's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
No, I am talking about
No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look, this is ridiculous.
No one does care about us.
I'm really interested in that. On the Politics Hub, we like to push the boundaries. He's got the majority. The question is, what is he going to do with it? Hello, welcome back. Now, there are a couple of people that Keir Starmer didn't really want to be talking about at this conference, but couldn't ignore. Nigel Farage, Andy Burnham and Tony Blair. Yeah, the former Prime Minister is said to be part of a board of peace to deliver an interim government in Gaza as part of Donald Trump's peace deal. Now, there have been hints for several months that he was on manoeuvres in the Middle East. I just want to show you how he answered this question about Benjamin Netanyahu that I actually put to him this time last year.
One person who I am quite interested to get your perspective on is Benjamin Netanyahu. What kind of leader do you think he is?
Well, look, I'm still involved quite a lot with this, what's going on in the Middle East right now. And so I'm not going to get into commenting on individual leaders, as that wouldn't be very helpful to what I'm doing. The most important thing is that we get a ceasefire that's sustainable and that we find a path back to some concept of security for the Israelis and self-determination for the Palestinians. And that's as much as you're going to get on that one.
So look, for Blair watchers, the signs were there for a while, but what did conference make of the deal and also the former Prime Minister's proposed role?
What did you make of the plan that was unveiled last night?
It is the only credible plan on the table, and it's really important that everyone engages with it seriously.
So I'll judge any plan on outcome. So it's good that people are talking, it's good people are around the table, but we need the war to stop now.
Well, the most important thing is that the killing must stop.
So getting an immediate ceasefire by any means is the priority. Then we need to get the hostages out and aid in, and anything that gets us closer to that is a good thing, and that's why we've welcomed it. But there's still a lot more work to do.
Unfortunately, I think it sounds quite ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. Recognising a Palestinian state and a free Palestine is about Palestinians having their own right to self-determination. How does this make any sense, and which Palestinian wants this?
What do you make of Tony Blair's involvement?
Again, it does not make any sense. I don't think the Palestinians want to be free so that Tony Blair can run their country. I don't understand that.
Well, Tony has got decades of experience in diplomacy. You look back to the success, for example, of the Northern Ireland peace agreement. He's remained deeply committed to the region and has been able to play a positive contribution so far. So it's really welcome.
I think there are many people already working to help the Middle East, and it's important that their voices are central to the way forward.
What did you make of the involvement of Tony Blair?
So I think it needs to wait and see what that involvement is. I opposed the war in Iraq. I think it was a massive foreign policy mistake. There are obviously scars from the war in Iraq, but my understanding is that actually it's the Arab nations that have been pitching for Tony's involvement in the plan and the group around the plan. But again, I'm less interested in who the people around the table are. I'm more interested in what the outcomes are, because we all desperately need this war to end right now.
I think it's fairly disastrous, if we're being honest. I mean, having Tony Blair lead anything in the Middle East is a bit of a risk as well.
Yeah, well, you say that about Tony Blair. Why? I mean, I know you might think it's obvious, but just why do you think it would be a disaster for him to lead it?
I mean, this man's reputation in the Middle East is centred around the Iraq War and Afghanistan, in which hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives, and it was a complete international disaster.
I've done an awful lot of what we in the industry call like vox pops at conference over the years, but this one felt quite different. Normally, pretty much everyone is very, very happy to talk to us in the media, but asking people about the Middle East, and particularly about the involvement of Tony Blair in the Middle East, felt quite different. Look, some people very, very happy to talk, but there was another group of people who I guess I would describe on the kind of centre-left or the soft left, felt much more wary. It almost felt a bit awkward asking them the question, and I think that reflects, firstly, how strongly people feel about this, how worried they are about it, but also the nervousness that people have around this as a political issue, and I guess the desire to make sure they don't say the wrong thing. Well, let's bring in Tracy and Joe, shall we? It was actually really interesting talking to people about this. You've got people who got really, really strong views and wants to know them. Bel Ribeiro, Adi, for example, Daniel Kabedi of the National Teachers Union, and then other people who were a bit more wary, like Anna Sarwar, I put in that camp. Like, you could tell he was kind of really thinking about how to pitch his answers, if that made sense. Well, Tracy, what's your take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, as Belle said, it doesn't make sense, but actually the war doesn't make sense. And the absolute human catastrophe that we're seeing day in, day out, and the way that the whole of Gaza is going to be absolutely flattened, there's going to be nothing left without peace. We have to, and you might not like the cast list, but we have to do everything that we can to get peace in the region. We have to have investment, and I think what is reassuring around some of the questions is that this is not just about Donald Trump and whoever. It's about those partners and those neighbours in the Middle East that are getting together to try and find a resolution, because we have to resolve this. The question is, will Hamas buy it? But Hamas are no friend to the Palestinian people, and we have to, as a matter of urgency, get peace in that region, get the hostages out, get the aid in, and stop this horror.
Jay, what's your take?
So I think we should talk about the Palestinian people for a moment. I've been lucky enough to visit Palestine in the past and spoken to a lot of Palestinian trade unionists and people in general. We work with Palestinian trade unions who have said they want the international community to support the rebuilding of Gaza, but that the people of Palestine should play a crucial role in determining that, and that we shouldn't see Gaza or Palestine rebuilt within an economic framework or model that suits Western countries. And if you'll permit me, point 10 of Trump's plan, a Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energise Gaza, convening a panel of experts who've helped birthed some thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. It goes on to talk about crafted by well-meaning international groups. That is not centering the people of Gaza. It's not centering the Palestinians. It's got economic imperialism written all over it. And I think that, combined with the selection of Tony Blair, and it doesn't surprise me that people were uncomfortable speaking to you about Tony Blair, because, you know, some people will share the view of Daniel and others that, you know, this is a highly inappropriate person who lacks sufficient credibility, you know, spearheaded a disastrous war, which, you know, I think helped breed an era of really simplistic Islamophobia. So I do think that discredits you as a person. But even if you're someone who thinks he has all this experience, he can bring those things, involving someone who is so controversial,
even if it is what the Arab states want,
yeah,
even if it's come from
if it's going to
involving involving somebody so controversial in a plan that, as I have just said, in itself is controversial, is a fatal flaw. And I think we shouldn't just be thinking right now about how can we fix this terrible problem. Of course we want a ceasefire. Of course we want to see an end of the genocide, of the mass starvation that has been imposed on people in Gaza. But we also need to make sure that we aren't storing up a much worse future problem. I mean, British colonialism is what is to blame really for this complete disaster. We cannot allow a plan like this with the cast list. I think the cast list is important to be forced on Palestinian people without their involvement and without their sanctioning.
It's a difficult issue, certainly is. Look, thank you both very much for the discussion. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, the Health Secretary delivers a barnstorming conference speech lambasting Nigel Farage's plans on the NHS, promising to tackle health inequality, and also praising Angela Rayner, saying we want her back. Hello, welcome back. Now, the NHS is practically a religion for the Labour Party, and the Health Secretary is widely considered to be one of the better communicators in Keir Starmer's cabinet. So, look, it was unexpected that his conference speech would go down pretty well in the hall. As well as announcements on rolling out the use of AI in the health service and also listing policy achievements on the NHS, Wes Streeting stuck with the theme of this conference and took the fight to reform.
Farage wants to replace the NHS with an insurance system. His vision for healthcare is a system that checks your pockets before your pulse and asks for your credit card before your care. Well, it might be all right for Mr. Moneybags. We know he can afford it. But what about those who can't? We should know by now that man is a con artist, posing as the voice of the people whilst working for the interests of the powerful.
So they're sticking to the message there on reform. He also praised Angela Rayner to rapturous applause.
And there's someone else who's made a real difference too, who understands the struggle care workers face because she was one. She brought that experience to the cabinet table as the care worker who became our country's Deputy Prime Minister. Angela Rayner, this achievement is yours. Thank you. And we want her back as well.
Want her back as well. There's a deputy leadership contest running, right? And we chat again to Tracy and Joe. What do you make of Angela Rayner? Would you like to see her back?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Angela, and I'm sure she will be back, without a doubt. If I could just say something, though, about what Wes said more broadly about the NHS,
sure,
if that's OK, because I think Labour are on firmer footing with the NHS, and I think, you know, their announcements today, so long as we don't see a decline in quality and standards, are going to be really useful and really helpful. But 23% of our NH staff are immigrants, are migrant staff, and I think that there is a mixed message coming out of this conference that I don't think Labour have properly got to grips with around how immigration is being experienced and discussed, and I think that that is really something that they're going to have to think about.
Be interesting to see.
I think that's interesting because the Prime Minister mentioned that. I mentioned that in my speech in the conference hall about the fact that people who care for us, and I mentioned care workers who cared for my mum in her final days, and we're asking them to go back. It seems, you know, the people who really do contribute, it seems counterintuitive that Farage is wanting to send them back. So it was, I think it's been a good argument from Labour about framing it not just people on boats, but people who care for us in our most needy moments.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that actually, you know, particularly in higher education, we have a continuation of the Tories' hostile environment. We have tougher restrictions. We have, you know, messages about asking people to go home. Like, we don't. Labour can say it as much as they want at this conference that we are welcoming to immigrate. For immigrants and for immigration, but it's just not true. We've got declining student numbers that are migrants. So I just think that there's a mixed messaging between the reality of how NH staff might be hearing some of these messages and then a celebration.
I want to give you a chance to come back on that if you want to. Or...
Yeah, I think there is certainly a point about how we frame it, that if you say this is a single man coming from another country, that will not contribute to our society, then of course there is a pushback. If it's somebody that is a care worker and of course is part of your community and part of your village, you would see it in a different way. I do disagree that we're making a hostile environment, but I think there is something about bringing people with us, saying, as Shabana Mahmood was saying, you know, the leave to remain. If I believe it as well, that if people come work, they can contribute and they're not bored, sat around for years on end waiting for their leave to remain. Okay. And actually making people feel vulnerable. It's actually about contributing to this country.
I would say someone can stay so long as they're contributing is a bit of a hostile environment.
Okay, well look, I feel like this debate could go on in the ad break, definitely. Thanks both very much. Still to come on the Politics Club, you know what I mean. A lot of flags at the Prime Minister's speech, but There were also a few pretty serious faces. So what is the Labour mood as this conference comes to an end?
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, a special report from the country's asylum capital. Glasgow houses more asylum seekers than any other city. Local officials say they can't keep up with the cost, and residents' attitudes appear to be turning. Also ahead, Sir Keir Starmer puts himself on a collision course with Nigel Farage. And I speak to the amateur golfer who hit 2 holes in 1 in the same round. All that and much more to come on the UK Tonight at 8.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C. Connor, what did you say to the President? What did you say?
He's had a great meeting with him. He's a great man.
David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that? Sky News in the UK, why do you think the President should intervene on Iran?
I think Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon is an acute threat to the national security of the United States.
Free wherever you get your news.
Go ahead, back white jacket.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. He called you Daddy earlier.
No, he did. He did it very affectionately. Daddy, you're my daddy. Thank you.
Leicester is on its knees.
They've ripped the soul out of my factory and there's nothing left.
It is eerily quiet.
It's constantly on the brink of capacity.
There's overcrowding. It's not a new thing.
It's rough.
There's nothing to hide. Why aren't international journalists allowed in?
Are you worried about escalation?
Of course I'm worried about escalation, which is why my focus is on de-escalation.
The region, I think, is on edge because they are anticipating a retaliation.
Iran retaliates for the US attacks.
Founding principle of the alliance, that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Could Putin attack another NATO country within 5 years?
Hear that whistle and that crunch. We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, they're in government with a stonking great majority and the leader gave a pretty decent speech. So, look, you might expect the cabinet to be able to crack a smile, but the cutaways told a mixed story.
Reasons to be cheerful, part 3. Reasons to be cheerful, part 3. Reasons to be cheerful, part 3. Reasons to be cheerful. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, conference. Fly those flags.
Well, Tracy and Jay are here, still smiling. We've also got the always chipper John Craig with us in the studio as well. I feel a bit sorry. I'm terrible. Like, you zone out sometimes. You have the resting face is not always what you want to present. It's a bit embarrassing.
At every conference, of course, the cabinet or shadow cabinet are in the front row, right in the view of the cameras, aren't they? I was thinking when I was watching that today that it must be difficult to clap when you've got a flag in your hand.
Yeah, you clap with a stick. Yeah, it hurts,
Rachel
right?
Reeves seems to be really struggling to do both. But, I mean, Ed Miliband looks as though he's having a little doze there, doesn't he?
He has got a face that never stops giving, isn't it, in those moments? It's just so memeable.
He's obviously had a long day, hasn't he?
Yeah, I wonder what he's thinking about. He didn't look happy about it, though, I have to say. Yeah, he didn't look happy about it. How do you think the mood is at conference then, John?
I think he cheered them up today, didn't he? Because, as we've discussed, he did make a good speech. I mean, it was a punchy speech. He really went for reform. And that passage in the middle when he rattled off all those Labour achievements, in the hall, they loved that. They really came to life then. I mean, somebody even suggested to me it was like Kinnock attacking militants in ¡85. 40 years ago tomorrow, that was. You weren't born, probably. But, I mean, I think it was one of the... I think we're all agreed it was possibly Sir Keir Starmer's best speech. And he really came out fighting, didn't he? And there was passion there. He talked again about his family, as he often does, and a few anecdotes in there. And some people thought he perhaps overdid the attack on reform. Too many mentions of Mr Farage, but they've clearly decided, the way the polls look at the moment, there's no point in just sitting back. They've really got to go after Farage, go in hard, and there was barely a mention of the Conservatives, was there? There was a tiny little mention towards the end, all those a bleak reference to Osborne and austerity and Liz Truss, but no mention really for the Tories.
What did you guys make of the mood of conference then, Joe? You must have done a few in your time.
Yeah, I've done a few. I mean, I think I completely agree with you. I think the speech that Keir delivered definitely gave people kind of a shot in the arm. I kind of think it is a bit of a shot in the arm until we get to where next, because I think I completely agree with you. I think, you know, at this moment in time, I don't think Labour can out-communicate reform. So what they need to do is deliver some really serious policies, because we aren't rallying around a personality here.
I'm not sure, given Reform's response that was incoherent and all over the place about Keir should be really disappointed with himself. I mean, that was really bad messaging, I thought.
Churlish, I thought.
It was really bad messaging. I thought it was fantastic, upbeat. I thought there was also a tenderness in the middle. I think there's something about that metaphor of a quiet knock on the door. And it means probably not much to busy people who think, you know, oh, you know, I'm never at home, who'd be knocking on my door? But for so many communities, that means so much. And what does Britain look like? I think his vision was really laid out.
The other thing that struck me about Nigel Farage's response, you see the size of his flags? I mean, Prime Minister and various ministers have the flags now, don't they? But Nigel, they were enormous.
Yeah, they were big. It's a flag off, basically.
Flag of Yorkshire.
You got the number, we've got the size. We need to take a couple of flags home, souvenirs, don't you think?
Yeah, we could do, yeah.
You wouldn't get them in through the door.
Well, no, I don't want one as big as Nigel Farage's flag, but I think we may have a few back there that people brought back. But I tell you what, everybody noticed today, there were the English ones, the Welsh and the Scots, but no Northern Ireland flags, were there?
There you go. There you go.
I think to the outside world, the whole flag thing in the hall might look a bit weird, if I'm honest with you.
Last night at the proms, it was terrific.
Yes, it was like last night at the proms. But also, I mean, we've grown used to those sort of Union Jacks at Tory conferences rather than Labour.
There we go.
Yeah,
also the rugby, the football, we all love it.
There we go. Great to have you here. Lovely to have you both here.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you on the Poll Hub, John. That's it from us tonight. Darren is going to be here tomorrow at 7 p.m. Up next is UK Tonight with Sarah Jeremy, but that is it from me from Labour conference here in Liverpool, where I'll be honest, well, I think the mood is better now after the speech than it was yesterday. I think that is certainly fair to say. Darren, we'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m.